clock tick here a little bit.
Yeah, and then I'll come back in at the other side.
The second request is, it's the one from, I didn't show. Yeah. We've been asking me. That's the first time that's ever happened.
Really? No. Oh, did you get the assignment sheet?
Yep.
Here.
I'll take it.
I was about to pass it down to you.
Is it a sign-in sheet for us?
No, just for the board.
Did anybody else do a?
I've got stuff
Right.
like that tomorrow.
Okay.
So I just left them sitting there on my desk, of course.
You just email them to me? There you go.
Thanks. All right. Are we, what's up? All right, we're going to call the March 20th, 2023 Dalton Township Zoning Board of Appeals meeting to order. First, we'll start with roll call. Nick?
Yep.
David?
Yes.
Nola?
Yes.
Marvin?
Yes.
And myself. Also here. All right, if everybody has had a chance to review the agenda, any questions or comments regarding the agenda? Otherwise, all those in favor of the agenda indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, our agenda is approved. Next, we have the approval of minutes. We have two. One is the December 19th, 2023 meeting minutes, which was our last meeting. And then also the resolution that resulted from that meeting. I don't know if everybody has had an opportunity to review that. That was here. I believe that is three of us. So I think there's only three of us who will vote on the minutes as presented. All right. All those in favor of the December 19th, 2023 minutes and the resolution from that, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And we'll just note that David and Nick were not here for that meeting and did not vote on that. Okay, next we turn to item 5. The main reason we're here, other than the two things to consider, first is our item for public hearing, which is ZBA 23-01 1127 Pine Avenue, James and Stephanie Holes. James or Stephanie Holes, are one of you?
Yes.
One of you here? All right. We're relatively informal here. Yeah, if you want to certainly go up to the podium there just to help us out. And take a few minutes and just kind of explain what your project is, what you're asking for, any of the documents you've submitted to us. We've of course reviewed it, but that just gives us a good starting point.
Sure. But before I say anything, I really want to thank you guys for what you've done to the park. Because I came to the board and I brought up the equipment that was in the park that was dangerous. Well, it was. Anyway, and you stepped up and you improved it, and I really want to thank you so much for it.
I'll have to pass that on to the board.
Yeah. Okay, the reason why I'm here is I'm asking for a variance, and the variance is that you have a requirement from the lake, 60 feet to the structure of the house. And I want to give you a little history of it. I had it all plotted out. I had stakes and I have a bobcat, and I started digging the hole for the foundation with my bobcat. And as I was at work, the contractor that's going to be doing the foundation gives me a call and he says, my guys are out of work and they want to finish your hole and I'll give you a discount. I said, sure. So they came out. Yeah. Make a deal. Yeah. I had it probably 3/4 of the way dug. And anyway, they came out and they dug the hole. But they didn't go by my stakes. They went by the stakes that I had for the front porch, not for the stakes of the main foundation. So they dug the hole 12 feet off. And I didn't realize it until I went out and I measured. And after seeing where the hole is and where the house is, it would be so beneficial for us to have it 12 feet or where the hole is. Did any of you guys go out to there? Oh, okay. The main point is that when we have the porch and the deck, that where the house is, we're able to see the whole shoreline of the lake. If we move the house back 12 feet, we won't be able to see the shoreline. And we have young kids that want to be swimming and that'd be dangerous. I would rather watch them than not. And also, the front of the house, we're gonna have access to the crawl space. And if we move the house back 12 feet, then I have to have seawall or retaining walls to be able to get in and out. And where the house is, I wouldn't have to do that. So, and eventually we want to do an addition to the house, which would be a room and a 2-stall garage. And by doing that, we would have to remove a large pine tree and some other trees for the driveway. But by the house being moved 12 feet, we won't have to do that. So that's my point.
How does your front house line compare to your neighbor's houses?
Oh, when I'm standing where the house wants, or where we want the house to be, it looks in direct line with the neighbors.
It lines right up. That's
Yeah,
what I
it
saw.
does. It lines right up.
If I took pictures.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, I went out there and I took pictures and it just all lined, it lined up perfectly.
yeah, I thought so.
Well, picture 6 is kind of the probably your best vantage point from where your deck will be. That's where the deck would be, correct?
Yes,
Okay, I was just making sure, because I didn't know if that was the house, and then you were going 12, and then I'm thinking that, okay, I got you.
yes.
Okay, that makes sense. So you're gonna be about 12 feet in front of your neighbors then?
No,
No.
no,
No,
it's
still
gonna
lined
be
right up.
even with the
It's
neighbors.
still lined right up. I saw.
'Cause I think it has them at 60 feet.
But they have a deck.
Okay, so are you saying 48 feet then to your deck or to your house?
No, to the deck.
Okay,
Yes.
that's what I was trying to put that together when I was
Yes.
out there looking at it, going, okay, are you going, okay, now it makes sense. So the decks will pretty much line up,
Yes.
and that's what, okay, that makes, so they're 12 foot, on that side would be 12 foot closer than the 60 or 70 foot. So that's what I was trying to figure, which one was 60 and 70. I'm not good at the math thing, so I was always trying to put it all together, go, which side was the 60 and which was the 70. So the one that we're looking at there in that picture 6, the one with that shows the deck there, that is the one that's probably 70 foot back then?
No, there's nothing. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, the neighbors, not you, when I was looking, because I was trying to put your numbers together with where theirs is a setback of 70. Yours it's still in alignment, but I just have to, I have to make sure I ask the right question so that we get to this point. So I think I understand now, because I can see from the picture 5, it looks very much straight out, like straight from that angle where you're going right from the post. You're kind of square with the
Oh,
railing.
yes, right.
And it goes right to there, so your decks will be matched up.
Yes.
That's ultimately what I was saying.
Right, yeah,
Okay, I
exactly.
got you.
Yep.
Hope I didn't confuse anybody on that. See, he's our educator, and he's drawing pictures for Dave, and I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Tell me what you just interpreted. To
Okay,
the front of his deck, he wants 48 feet from the high
Right.
water line.
well, here, the 70 foot was to the house, not the deck. So the decks now are probably, like he was saying, they're going to be even.
Yeah.
So his house here is gonna go 60, but it's only gonna be 48 to the deck. Here, it's gonna be basically the same thing. So here it was 70 to the house, or the house.
Mhm.
Now with minus that, it's gonna be, what is it, 58 or so. Okay. On that side, and the other side would be, so it's relatively the same, and with the curvature of even the water. It's,
So the measurements that they put in here are to the front of the deck.
that's what he's
Yes.
saying.
But
That's
the
what,
other ones are to the front of
house.
the house.
Right.
Correct. That's why I was confused. I thought we were
Yes.
going We're comparing apples and oranges, yes.
Measured apples and compared to the oranges.
I was kind of the grapefruit at that.
Somebody better measure right.
That was the big question I had, but I understand now.
Yes.
With your drawing, actually, I appreciate that. That was,
And the deck's going to be elevated?
Yes. Well, it's gonna be on the first floor of the house, the main floor of the house. And
Do you have a walkout?
underneath the porch,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. It's actually a crawl space with a walkout. It's only gonna be 5 feet deep, the crawl space, but we need the access door in the front because of the ground and be able to get in and out.
Okay.
I want to use it for storage of summer stuff and bolts.
So your front deck will only be about 5 to 6 feet off the ground
Yes.
rather than normal.
Right.
Any other questions from the board at this point in time?
and just to make sure that other deck is also elevated, correct? The one that you have the picture of the post?
Right, that
So
is,
It's actually, this right here
the full
is actually a
floor.
raised deck also. So it's not like we're putting a raise next to a lower deck. where we
Right.
have the sight line. That makes sense.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Your variance that you're requesting, is this a new building project
Yes.
or a future building project?
We want to actually pour the foundation this spring.
So this is it?
Yeah.
So your variance is really to go 60 feet for the house and then 12 foot for the deck.
Yeah.
Okay. So we just need to approve the 60 foot. And then the deck would be,
Well, the 60 foot is part of the new district. But because the deck is attached to the house,
for moving it.
cemented in, that's considered a structure
Right.
in the same sense as if it were a house or the house.
And it's going to be a
And that's the
covered
12
deck.
foot closer, so that's
There'll be
our
a roof over it also.
area. You'll have a roof over it.
Mhm.
Oh, so the roof line's gonna carry out, so.
Yes.
So it's a deck, but it's not a deck, it's a all seasons room that's more airy than all seasons.
Yeah, not really, because there's no walls. Yes.
When the house was built, it was under a old zoning requirement, is that correct?
It's not built yet.
Oh, it's not built yet.
No, we plan on building that
The
house.
other
The
ones
other two
were.
next to it are,
We will
Other
leave
two.
that. Yes.
Well, under the
Right,
old.
that I
zoning
took
requirement.
pictures of and, oh, that's a different house. And another point is that we found a foundation of a house on our land and we're putting our house where the foundation was.
generally only works if you keep all the walls and everything else. But it's still interesting to have it, so. Yeah, because the one would not have needed zoning,
Right.
and the other one would have needed a 10 foot. Under the new,
Yes.
that used to, I think we've done 3 in a row.
Yeah, I
David and I were
always
talking
say,
and we're trying to remember that. And I don't know if any other board members were here for those. Well, I'm trying to think, the other 2 on Goose Lake and Goose,
No, I wasn't here for
so I think it might just, because we've done both of the other ones
that. I wouldn't remember, yeah. I wasn't here for that.
that are mentioned here, so. Okay, any other questions for our applicant?
I think for clarifying that, because you want to be consistent,
exactly.
especially if you have others coming behind this one,
Mhm.
or setting precedents.
Yeah, I think it's.
All right, thank you. You're welcome to sit down. We may still have some more questions for you as we talk.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no problem.
So, okay, next, I just want to make sure we have the opportunity before the board considers is we will open for public comment if anybody has comment on this particular proposal.
We're just here in support.
Okay.
We're their neighbors.
Okay,
We got no problems or
Next
nothing.
door.
okay. And which property are you?
We're 11115.
With the chicken coop
Yeah.
and the addition to the front.
Yeah.
See, that's what I remember.
That's what I remember. When you came in, I remember that I came out there to do the site visit and you were coming out of you were carrying a chicken coming. It literally scared you. I'm thinking, I didn't have any way to say, excuse me, without scaring me. Remember, both you and the chicken remained calm, so I appreciate it.
All right, then, noting there's nobody appearing for public comment, we'll close public comment on this particular proposal and then turn it over to the board for discussion. Any thoughts, questions for the board or for the board members?
From the visit, I understand it better than probably from the pictures.
Mhm.
It's easier to stand.
Same here.
If you stand at their property line looking towards the deck, that's a better vision of what it's going to look like. Which, looking that way, all I see are the things on the trees and it's hard to put two and two together. But I don't see any infringement on sight lines, nothing where you would have any periphery, anything. I don't think there'd be any reason to say it's gonna infringe on anyone else's property at that point. As far as the view on that, it's a beautiful lake and beautiful.
Yes.
It's gonna be a beautiful home.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, that's gonna be spectacular.
I hope so.
Yeah, I know, I tried looking, I tried parking at the park,
Yeah,
actually, and looking back,
yeah,
just to be consistent with everything I did.
right.
I echo David that it seemed to.
It's not sticking out beyond where you'd say, oh, I don't have the sense of what are we setting ourselves up for or setting it too close. I think it's.
Which is an issue we've had on a few other lakes where they really want to go too far forward. And we've been
Right.
very concerned about neighbors. Essentially, you're blocking whatever view they may have had previously.
I think the previous decisions on other properties is a plus. Plus, also look at the support from neighbors.
Yes.
Either side that support this various requests.
All right, then I think we'll just take a moment to go through our factors. Nick, is this your first meeting?
But you guys, yeah.
Yeah, there are the standard factors that we typically go through, and a lot of times we'll just kind of discuss them amongst ourselves and do one final vote on all of them. If we have a particularly difficult hearing or disagreement on one board, we'll sometimes vote on each one. But I think typically 95% of the time, we just kind of discuss each one of these. So if we enforce the literal requirements of the ordinance, what type of practical difficulties would it force the applicant to do?
Would you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is our practical, if they were forced to comply with the
Go backwards,
ordinance, right?
Yeah.
So that we're not gonna grant them a variance. What practical difficulties are we forcing them to do?
I don't know if it's difficulties, but as far as keeping it so we have roughly the same setbacks on everything, we'd have some inconsistencies then, where they would be back a little farther than either of the neighbors potentially, if that were to be the case. Or it
They
would-
would have to be cutting trees down that they really shouldn't have to cut down.
Removal.
Tree removal.
And the safety of being able to see the shoreline. That's a big one.
That's a big one there too, right?
All right,
I'm sorry.
that's okay. This is our moment to kind of discuss here as we go through. And certainly if we have questions, we're happy to ask. That's all right, that's all right.
So
I would say also that they would not enjoy or deprive of the enjoyment of their property.
I want to make sure I'm clear on this. We're granting the permission to change the rules in a situation
Mhm.
because it is going to be a hardship if we don't.
Loosely, yes. The definition then of hardship are these factors, these 4 factors. So that's when we talk about practical difficulties, that and the last one are a little bit fuzzy at times to try to figure out, but I think one consistent thing the board has had is there's no practical difficulties. Why are we doing this? Where the opposite becomes true, that there's no real reason here. you could plant the tree here, or you could plant the tree here. You can't tell me there's a reason one way or another. Okay, now there's no support, there's no practical difficulty there at that point.
Yeah.
So,
You know, when I think about the construction process, obviously, we're always changing land. I wish it were clearer in the description as far as the exact distances from homes to the lake and why did they get a variance to add a deck onto the front of their home to put it that close? Or how did we get to the situation where things are being measured differently? If he's having to measure from the front of the deck to get 48 feet from the high water line, why isn't the house to the left or the right measuring that same distance? And so I'm a little bit like, thanks, but like, why do we have this variation? Would you be willing to speak to it?
Well, I don't know exactly the dates, but prior it was 100 foot.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we got the variance, so that we could bump up.
The lake.
But then in the meantime, it changed to 60. So possibly that might help you wonder where we ended up.
Right, plus it went from 100 to 75. And we were at 85 and our deck was 14 feet, so we had to get a variance because we weren't within that realm. And
Okay,
then
So
it was
that's how we
changed
ended up
after
where
that,
we are.
Okay.
and it was all y'all changing it. We were changing
I had nothing to do with it.
it. I know.
It's not what we say.
Well, it was a great change, believe us, it was awesome, you know,
Yeah.
we could.
and lakes are tricky because we often informally give it a few extra feet one way or another, just because what is that high water line?
Correct.
And my guess is that it would probably hit it 4 years ago. But nobody staked out what that was at that time. And it could have been up even more at one time, or it could have been less. You know, that gets a little tricky. So we're sometimes a little flexible on that. But obviously here, you know, if all they wanted was a foot or two, it might not be here. But obviously here, it's a 12-foot
Mhm.
request. So.
From what we've had before is it starts to be the competition. So you see, if somebody were to go 60 feet and somebody goes 55, and then someone here goes 50, and this person's at a disadvantage. So that was the idea with the 60, is we set a 60 as a thing, but there were already non-conforming around that. So now you have to balance it as, like they were saying, they were given 100 feet, and then someone else now comes in at 60 feet. It's now you have to, we used to have a lot more play in it, and now we're pretty much limited to what we can approve. We have to go beyond that. It requires this step now with the 60, so.
But we didn't have the lake overlay district.
At
You know,
that time,
and that's
correct,
the
yeah.
difference.
Yeah.
Where there was a couple of years, 60% of our requests, maybe more, were all lakefront or lake parcel. And we kept screaming, hey, we're gonna keep trying to be as consistent as we can, but these are different lots because they're smaller, they're typically oddly shaped if you give us a district. So once that came out, we've been pretty consistent with that, and we've denied a few things just based on that new standard. So. All right, then and these all somewhat flow together, you know, they're not incredibly distinct, but I think they do point us in some different directions that we don't always cover. Whether or not special conditions or circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structures, or buildings involved, which are not applicable to other lands, structures, or buildings in the same district. Now, this is the one where we worry about the neighbors, but really in some ways, this is the whole R1 district, which is a little bit broader than that. So, which is hard to do because it's still lake overlay, but. This is it's number one, you got lake. So you're flat out with what you can do with that. And then two, you know, we do have a natural barrier in place with the trees between the house and the road, which is unique to this particular piece of property. That certainly is something we'd like to conserve as much as possible. I think all R1 districts not having to rip up every tree that you have from the front of the house to to the road if you're able to keep some of those. So,
Yeah, my whole circle driveway is all trees. I like it. Yeah.
we really don't have any structures or buildings at this point, you know, they're not asking for a special addition, that's gonna be a couple feet over or something like that. I think just for the property, so. Whether or not if we denied this request, we would deprive the applicant of property rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same zoning district. This has always been my interpretation, this becomes kind of the neighbor one to a certain degree of have other neighbors.
They support.
Number one, they support, number two, they've had the same.
It's roughly, it's the same distance
Yes.
in effort and in application. They're all living next to each other, doesn't create any hardships.
And we've allowed those other properties before the Lake District to do that. So in some sense, with this being in between, oh, my grandfathered in is not quite the right word, but I almost feel like
Precedent has been set.
there's some deviation we can do from the Lake effect, from the Lake District because of that. Going forward, so. And obviously we have support, which to me is critical. We had one negative letter, I probably feel a little differently. To
Right.
this from either of the two neighbors, but,
By the way, the record will reflect that even if the ownership of the properties change. You know, future owners would come back in and say, well, how did this happen? Well, the record will indicate that.
and then we kind of hit this one a little bit, already. That if we granted this variance, it would not be of substantial detriment to the other lands around it, or contrary to the spirit and purpose of the ordinance. None of us can tell you what the spirit and purpose of the ordinance is, but we sort of understand. I mean, the point is you can't have everybody building at the lakefront, which is why we have a setback.
Right.
Just because the water does change, so we've got to have some sort of setback.
There is a slope in the front of the property from that too, which also I'm not as concerned about potential water approaching the building or anything either. So I think that's another reason for it fits on that side of the lake. They all seem to have that in common, so it does make sense.
And these, I mean, frankly, the two neighboring parcels are part of the reason why we have a lake district now. I mean, those were two of the ones where that plus a couple over here where we said the planning and the board, we need some assistance here because either we're gonna keep doing this piecemeal or you're gonna give us some guidance. So this, as I said before, and I still think it's important, the precedent we're starting here is if your neighbors have the same one, we might line you up with the neighbors. But if you come in first, we're probably not gonna grant that anymore because it's out of
Right.
what the district allows.
Right.
So,
You know, the commonality is the water line is one, and two would be the decks themselves.
Right.
That would be quite consistent.
and although it's gonna have a roof over it, it's not structure to the sense of being a full addition to the house. Got four walls, etc.
Is that an issue?
I think it helps because that's consistent with the neighbors, you know, because we're dealing with decks, et cetera. I think if they wanted to put a full, I may feel differently if they wanted to put a full building you can see through on the angles, et cetera.
So in 5 years, if neighbors sell, let's see, if neighbors sell and they come in and want to put a full addition on the front of their home and close it in and say, well, my neighbors have theirs at 48 feet, I want the same thing. So that's something we need to consider.
Absolutely, we could.
Isn't it that if they already have theirs built, their front porch deck is already built? I don't think I understood your question.
So if they decide, and neighbors decide that with their lot, the way they're set up and they have the deck on the front, they're gonna eliminate the deck and they're going to put a 15-foot addition or 12-foot addition, whatever it is, to get them to the 48 feet as their neighbor is. What is that? Is that something that is then going to create issue by providing a variance to allow 12 feet? And then the neighbors want their 12 feet, then the ones next to them are like, well, we want our 12 feet. I don't know. I'm just asking questions at this point.
You know, certainly we're gonna already have,
I'm like, don't they already have that?
they have some,
But they already have the deck there already.
There's a I'm guessing somebody would say that's a non-permanent structure, and they want to tear that down and put that permanent structure attached to the home.
and we
I
would
don't know
have,
how that,
we would have to look back on it, but what we typically do is we only approve these for the plans that are submitted to us. So if the plans are a deck, you don't get to change that to a structure without coming back to us as a hearing, because
Right.
we had a couple issues a few years ago. We're pretty, what you bring to us is what you get approved. You don't get to change that during the building process or in the future because you presented it as is to us.
Without coming back before us.
Exactly.
And paying the fee.
Because then that gives us the opportunity to consider what a full structure might impact the neighbors, and if they care, if they don't care, et cetera, because then we're setting ourselves up to each neighbor can now build.
absolutely. And I want a roof over top of my deck, and I want.
Exactly.
Sure,
So,
sure.
so a lot of times we limit, in fact, I can't think of when we haven't made the resolution pursuant to the specs and plans submitted to the board, and that they're limited to that. We've even gotten to the point with structures, with housing, of making sure what the roof line pitch is gonna be and that sort of thing, because it was a side easement that we were encroaching over, and depending on how you did your roof, you can change a lot on what that eave is gonna do. So we've been specific about that. That's not here in this case, but we have a lot of ability to shape that, whatever the board feels comfortable with. Right, anything else?
One last clarifying, sorry for being the new guy. When I was sitting on the planning commission, during the COVID times, I did some ZBA modules. I think they were through Michigan State. And when, at that time, it felt like they were pushing really hard that these are like a no, this is black and white, like boom. And regardless of how nice somebody is, or regardless of how sweet it is, like the rule is the rule is the rule. And you are changing precedent by voting yes on some of these things. And so just kind of trying to get a feel with where, as a board, where do we stand on that? And like, I'll be honest, I look at some of these and I'm voting like, okay, I can see that one, yes, yes. And then I go, well, I'm not sure on that one. I'm a little bit off, and I just don't know what's been past
I
practice.
think that when we went to, it came down, the biggest issues we always had were the lakes.
Yeah.
Because the properties were postage stamps, and when you put something, you want to go this much closer, now that obscures vision from this side. You have to look at, we'd go out and take the pictures that way, and I actually bought one of those wheels that I could take it from, and we were trying to get where we were setting ourselves up for consistency. And I think, to me, when you think of consistency, if you look at our drawing that we had, we're really within constraints of consistency, and we're not going to where this is a 30 feet in front of this house, and we're approving that. We're really keeping them so that the flow of the houses are consistent, and we have no one being affected negatively. The owners of the house are building to what they want, and the people on each side are retaining what they have. So really, those last two questions, are we stepping on anyone's toes by putting this in, or are we stepping on their toes by returning it down? So that is the one, I went to the trainings and things, and that's where they said your book should be your Bible, and that should be where you go with it. Except when you have inconsistencies or things like, and that's part of like what we're working on, getting this to where it speaks more to some of the duplicity in it at times. There was some verbiage in there, but I mean, without getting into the book itself, we should be trying to enforce this rather than override it. And since how many of these, we haven't had that many of these at all, where
It's been
there
the
used to
first,
be, when
like,
you guys
one,
were first, before I came on there was almost monthly, if
Mhm.
not, very consistent, where all these were going, and it was exactly what you were saying, and we were doing what would be considered spot zoning, because you could say, well, this person wants this, and then the plans the builders would then put in place weren't equaling what they approved. So then you have that issue of how do you go back, and you can't unring a bell. But it really got into that. This is where, I guess the consistency is the simple answer, is that we want it to be on that side of the lake. It would seem to fit for what the idea of that lake is. You want to live on the lake, you want to view the lake, you want to have peace with your neighbors. And we've got all those things pretty well taken care of here. So I guess for, one way of looking at it, and I felt the same way, as they really put you in a position where they want you to defend your, and there really needs to be that, so that there is not just every meeting we have another one of those where someone comes forward because they don't like what that says. And in this case, it's just a matter of whether they prove that beyond what we consider to be fair and equitable, and is anyone coming out on the short end of this? Thank you.
And my philosophy has always been, we're supposed to deny everything. We shouldn't exist. So we're here as is this an exception? Should this be an exception? And I'm generally desperately worried about setting precedent. And if we can't find a way that makes this a unique situation, I typically vote no on that. We had one, 2 months ago, 3 months ago now, or 3 meetings ago, that was the lot, and they wanted to expand or change what the minimum lot requirements were, et cetera, et cetera. And we went back to the fact that there was actually a road that had been deeded and mapped and never used.
Yeah.
That was the only reason I voted yes on that, because that was different than any other. So if you fit that same exact piece, you had a road there, everybody kind of assembled around the road, it just hadn't been used because it hadn't been done through the back. And I say, okay, maybe that's unfair then to force, because this is now a unique situation. But this is totally unique compared to the one right next to it, where if the one right next to it asked the same thing, I would deny that because they did not have a road that came through. I mean, that was the only reason I voted yes on that one, because there was a distinction and I didn't feel that would cause precedent. Unless you had that same exact circumstance, and then I'd be very happy to vote yes again for the same exact reasons. And I probably wouldn't vote for this or be in favor of it, but for, as I've said, the other two parcels, which I feel we're now cleaning up and being consistent with those. But if it was a standalone or the first, I'd say, no, we now have a lake district. You got to follow that. We'll go from there. So that's my own personal, take that, keep that. I know we all feel differently about, but that's how I've always thought about this. Is this an exception? Is this an exception that is big enough to drive a semi through? Or is this a narrow exception that I can point to the next person and say, if you had bet A, B, and C, I would vote yes, but you don't, so I'm going to vote no.
And I wouldn't say any of the questions are more important, but get down to C and D, whether they're being restricted or it's gonna hurt the people on either side. If you have to answer, it hurts either one of them.
Then you got a problem.
Then you have to really consider, that's when this becomes really important. You can say, this is our reason that we would say that exists. But in this case, it's, again, like you said, down the road, that is the battle we would face if someone decides that what they would like to do down the road to make their deck a 4-season room. They would have to bring that plan together, and then we'd have to look at it as, well, now what does that look? And I'd go out to do the same thing I did this time. I'd stand there and look where you stand on that side and go,
Yep.
all right, I don't know if I can do it because it does, now I don't see the lake on this side, or, maybe water, like when you have the ones that are infringing on there, like you said, the slope of the roof, and is it water gonna go on to the next lot? And where we, sometimes it's the setbacks, which it's hard to move setbacks. They're there for a reason. This is not with a neighbor conflicting, where one of them wins and one of them loses. This sounds like to me again, something could, everybody has to.
I'd like to share my own personal story. I can hear exactly what you're saying, the way I felt when I first came on board. trying to figure out how do we make decisions collectively as a group. What are the guidelines, and using a zoning board rule and looking at requests by homeowners, how do you go about being fair to everyone consistently? You're going to find out that every case is unique.
Yep.
And based upon the good work that the staff would do for us, and giving us information, we could do our on-site visits and engaging the public and let them tell us their story, how they would like to enjoy their property. So we try to accommodate and be consistent so that they can enjoy their property.
Without infringement, so that someone suffers the consequences of what we do. And that's a fine line in some cases.
Right.
But we say no, we've said no, and then we've done.
We've forced tear downs.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
We have forced tear
Poor people at the deck.
downs.
Those people at the deck.
because we have to protect the interests of other homeowners,
Right.
landowners at the
Right.
same time. So
Right.
we try and be as fair and.
There's one on North Lake, I think, if that's what, where we,
Line
Yeah,
coverage and
beginners.
the fact they exceeded what was originally put
Yep.
into the.
it was unpermitted work and
You
we,
knew about that.
we said, time to
Yeah.
tear that down. and
So
go from there.
I'm like, it's shorter board.
That one just popped up on my phone from a reminder how you get those memories.
Oh,
So I was out there looking at that picture and that was one that, again, you can't do it and beg forgiveness. You have to come in and ask permission. And
Yeah.
that's why
Yeah.
this process is important and it's a great, you're exactly right though. I think we've all looked at those questions and said, if I'm being fair, which way do I go? And sometimes when I'm really in a quandary, I know that I'm probably leaning no, because it means I might be infringing on somebody. But if I don't see you go, well, I don't see anything that's gonna harm anyone. And then you say, I guess we move forward.
okay, any other questions, thoughts regarding this one? Any of the members would like to make a motion, either approve or not approve the request?
Verbiage on that. I make a motion to grant a variance of 12 feet from section 9.5 E at 1127 Pine Avenue to allow for a front yard setback of 48 feet from the ordinary high water mark on Goose Egg Lake.
Support.
All right, we have a motion with support to approve the request. Are there any questions regarding the motion? All right, then we'll do a roll call. Nola?
Yes.
Harmon?
Yes.
I will also vote yes. David?
Yes?
And Nick?
Yes.
All right. All the board members have voted in favor, therefore that motion carries. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
I'm so glad you guys. Wait to see you excited. Can I get a home tour? I want a home tour. Absolutely.
All right, we are going to move from tour requests to communications. If anybody, if we have any communications
Thank you both.
Not
that we
that
need to be
I,
aware of, that you're aware of, so
I'm,
there should be a big sticky note that says, tell them
baby
this.
girl.
Baby girl, okay, you know, that's good to know right there.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I think she was born Monday, maybe? I was at a conference last
I'm
week.
glad he's not here to
Yeah,
do
yeah.
that,
I
so,
think he's done good at staying.
right.
Home.
All right, we will then move to old business, which was a previous request at our old meeting regarding A1 store and lot.
That's me.
All right. Okay, and before we get started on this,
I think Nick and I need to.
you're welcome to stay.
Okay.
I mean, I don't have any issues
I don't
with
have a problem
having
with
them stay here.
I don't have a problem.
I just don't think you're able to vote, just because you weren't here. even though I will say for the record, we didn't discuss it a lot.
That's fine.
Because we did have some questions, so. Okay, we'll then turn to this, Brian Holman
Yes.
is present here. This is in regards to 2505 Whitehall Road. All right, Mr. Holman, if you want to come up,
Am I okay here?
why don't you just come right there, because we've got video. And I'm not sure if there's a camera or how that works, so. We don't have spotlights though, so at least don't have to deal with that. So why don't you explain to us what your request is, what you're asking?
Well, I don't think either one of us is gonna be completely happy with how this went down. The fence is already installed. When I filed the variance and sent it in and dropped it off out here, drove out, I didn't hear anything for a period of time. I came back out here, met with the gentleman. He said he sent me an email. But yet when you guys send me for this meeting, you send me a letter. So when I came here to get a permit that day, he told me, well, we can get you for a meeting sometime in December. Where does that put me putting a fence in December? When I read the original thing of 75 feet back, my building is 100 feet. I laughed. Okay. Where I put my fence is 10 foot further where I wanted to put it. I put it 43 feet back from the center line, even with Riverside sign. There's no problem with that. That's more than sufficient. I didn't come to the last meeting because I figured you guys knew the fence was already installed and had a chance to look at it. But so am I here to ask for permission or beg for you to do something so simple? It's 200 foot of fence, which is well more way back than any setback that I'm giving up my property for. Because I'm giving up my property for that. You look at fences all around the area. You look at the undeveloped industrial park across me that looks like crap. You look at the building on the corner that's for sale. That's a dump with its chain link fence right up on the road. There's 1,000 examples we could give to make this A-okay. And then there's the $600, like not buying the fence was not enough. I had to pay $600 for a variance to get permission for this simple thing, well beyond what's reasonable to do to my property. That I didn't like. I work hard. I have to earn that $600 by working hours to achieve that. And what am I getting for that $600? I appreciate you guys all being here, if that's what that's for.
All right. Let's back up a couple steps.
Sure.
All right. Can you explain to us first what the fence is for?
It's a store and lock.
No, I'm aware of what it is. Why did you?
That's your,
why did you
that's your
decide
answer,
to
dude.
put a fence where it's at?
It's a store and lock.
Okay, hold on. I got a question.
That is a silly question.
No, it's not, because it's just one little stretch of fence. It's not.
That's all I can afford right now.
Okay, that's a little difference, but if you're putting it in for the store and lock for security, it would be the whole thing surrounded.
That's all I can afford right now. I would love to have a fence around the whole place and gated like everybody else. But I pay $13,000 a year in property tax. And before I paid that off after my mom passed, that's 1/3 of the profit every year. I go to try and sell a car out on my property and you tell me I can't do that to make some extra money. Is it my property? Do I feel like it's my property sometimes? Not really. I have 3.5 acres undeveloped. I had the neighbor that wanted to buy a 1/2 acre for 30 grand. I came in here to talk to him about do that. They tell me, you got to change that whole 3.5 acres from commercial to residential. Okay, well, that takes that right out of the plan. I could have had $30,000 to help me build a fence, to put a gate, to make my property more secure. But I can't do that because is it really my property? When it comes to tax, I mean, really, it's not. I don't have a mortgage, but I'm paying $13,000 a year in property tax. Before I paid the mortgage off, I was always behind in it, paying extra money for that. And again, that brings us back to a $600 variance. So excuse me if I'm not the happiest person being here, because there's two things I'd rather be doing, making money or sleeping, than something so simple. It's a fence. It's a fence. It's a store and lock. I'm not trying to be disqualifying to you guys. I think that you guys are probably great people. I don't know you. But the facts and the principles, how I feel about this whole thing, I have an attitude I have to control. Why I wanted to stay seated is I have less anxiety. I'm calmer when I sit.
Hey, Ryan, you talked about the future of your fence. What are you thinking about for that? As far as, are you going was looking at
And
this drawing.
it brings up a good question because I've paid the $600 variance. I just recently, with being full out there, am considering putting another building up. I don't want to go into debt. Interest rates are ridiculous. I'm trying to save money. I'm trying to find another way to get an interest rate around 3.5%. Because I'm not going to pay our government that. So can I include that variance possibly in the consideration of the building I'm like to put in the back next to the other one? The old owners, when they owned it, they were going to put it in and help and leveled up, but there was a thing with a $2,500 permit. So Mr. Thomas said, no, I'm not paying Dalton Township the $2,500 permit. He bailed on the idea of putting another building, but I'm considering it. So do I have to file a whole new variance with those plans, or can I use this same variance?
I think you need to go before the planning commission for that. That's a separate thing, because that's something it's a future thing. And then you just.
Spring.
Yeah, and you just present your plan. Like if you bring this in like you've done here and you say, here's what I'm doing. I'm putting this building in, here's the pitch of the roof, here's how high it's gonna be, here's the doorway, there's a list of things that you need to include in that. It's pretty simple. And honestly, with people that own the property and, that's a separate thing. That it wouldn't be something it's kind of two different
Start
things.
the planning commission.
Yeah, you start, and that was one you bring in your plan. If you come in and talk to Steven, he would give you the list of things that are required. You make a site plan and you put it all together. And that's something that's pretty.
And excuse me, I want to get,
We're clear, that's for a third building.
it would be a third,
That's the fence.
Correct.
there's the automotive.
So
building.
this is just the 200-foot of
Yes,
fence.
you have nothing. That's
Amend
what I'm trying to say. This would be.
Right, yeah, it'd actually be a fourth building, fifth with
Yeah.
the, but yeah.
Okay.
But I wanted Nick, get back to you. I don't know if I completely answered your question as far as the fence goes. I geared off on you, but my plans are where the fence ends right there. We have a bullpen that has cars in it.
So Riverside, I get that one. And then there's a back here, right, is the bullpen.
Yeah, so here's Riverside.
There's your two buildings. The current fence sits here. A-guard's running right here.
Yes, so my fence goes to here.
Mhm.
And the bullpen is right here, okay? And so where the fence, I ended the fence where the other chain link fence ends.
Okay. Maybe flip it over. The backside of that's maybe a little bit, yeah, that would be.
Yeah.
Better than my,
Brian, do you mind repeating what you just said down here? Just so Marvin and I can see what you just said on this. If you could just point out.
Use the other.
so future plans, with the fence, where it stops is identically parallel with the bullpen, we call it. It's a gate fence where Riverside keeps all his cars and stuff back there. So I want to put a gate for the entrance right there. So that would be the first thing financially wise I'd like. That's what I'm drawing there. It's totally ridiculous. Right here is where the fence ends. And so right here would be a gate and then it would just be a fence right there. So the cars would still be like the barrier there. So again, the fence ends here, gate here, and then fencing just to butt up to the bullpen.
Mhm.
So it's all going
Mhm.
back in the property.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay.
You know, this way. You know, for here, this is its own 3.5 acres. So I didn't want to go, I don't know what's gonna transpire ever here. It may be whatever my son decides to do when I pass, I don't know.
Okay.
So I didn't want to
So,
I would like to, it's not completely, I would like to have something, I even thought about those concrete blocks when I would see what you guys is just putting some concrete blocks there temporary so people couldn't just drive in just as a security. So I don't know what you guys' feelings would be about that, but that's a future thing I've thought about. I like to take a lot of time to think about things.
Are you planning on continuing this fence at the same height or the same color? Wood edge?
No, not at this point, because this is its own piece of property divided 3.54 acres. So
Yeah, I saw
I don't
that.
know that
If you,
some will be developed there, if all decide to sell it, or I already had someone that wanted to buy a half acre here for 30 grand. Up to Tibbs that live here wanted to extend theirs, but they said I would have to change this whole thing to residential to be able to do that, and I'm not willing to do that.
so,
Here's where I'm gonna put that other building.
okay, that was my next question. So if you added another store and lock building, it would be roughly roughly in those
Yeah,
areas.
in any other futures, if there was ever a financial thing, would be behind the other one. So I don't even, this isn't, I don't see ever in my lifetime me putting any units there.
So going along the same thinking, you won the lottery, you spent all the money on fencing you wanted to, right?
Right?
So you would make this corner
Correct.
and then
Back.
right back
From here,
behind.
straight here?
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah, I would see where that actual 3.5 acres dead stops and do the setback from that
There's a
and go.
billboard or
Yeah.
there's something else right here, isn't
Yeah,
there?
yeah.
I mean, not that that's not
Yeah, we
movable,
haven't
but
used it in years. It's,
Okay.
it's not, doesn't have a
and this
license.
property, you have an existing fence too.
Yeah, that's for sale. and It's pretty run down.
So
I don't know what's ever gonna
Okay.
happen across the street.
because, and the reason I was asking that is your request is for 200 feet, which is what you have here.
Correct.
So if you had wanted to put a new building here,
Right.
that's a different request. But at this,
Right.
as I'm understanding it, this works because he's got his corner already established going that way.
These guys over here at, they're putting up tree stumps and all that, so they're making a great wall there. So I wouldn't see why I would need a fence there. And this is all woods, so again, the security part of it would be, here's your opening. And I explained my plans that I'd mentioned I could do there.
Yep. Okay. Did everybody's, since I called him over here to draw, no, I didn't mean to take him away from your end there
Did
too.
that answer your question too?
So,
I'm okay.
all right. Right now, the next question I'd like to ask, and I know you're not happy with this process. Part of us,
We all have a job to do.
with the exception of somebody at the end, who we like to pick on because she's actually elected. The rest of us are quasi volunteers here.
Sorry, I'm letting people know.
Enforcing the same rules that you're having to deal with, right? So help us. Give us some reasons why you decided to put the fence where you did. Just some concrete reasons, because from my looking at it, you could have put it right at the edge of the grass. I mean, there's nothing structurally stopping you from doing that. You could have even put it closer to the road, although I think if I remember right, there's a ditch at some point that you would run into. But why did you choose that? Give us some reasons why that's a good spot to have a fence.
The zoning, the reading wanted me to put it back 75 feet,
Correct.
which would have put me halfway in my parking lot.
Okay.
For my buildings at 100 feet. So that's kind of what I kind of made them laugh about that. My intentions were to go 33 feet. And then when I realized it was 75 and we had to do a variance and all that, I said, okay, let me take another look at it. So I looked at the property and I seen where Riverside Automotive's sign with its steel sign is implanted in the ground with this big sign that goes that, but I went with the post. So the sign still goes out further. So that's 43 feet is where that sign's concreted in the ground, that big metal thing. So I said, okay, let's go with that. And I'm giving up an extra 10 foot than what I wanted to, but if I could have gone back further, that would have been nice to salvage some of my property, but those plows fly through there too. And, my fence is protected. I would have liked to have been at 33 feet. I did the 43 to be accommodating for Dalton Township and to make a compromise per se.
Okay. Now, humor me. Next question. All right. I'm sometimes called the spatially, I'm the one who has a hard time visualizing things. That's why I'm staring at this. Tell me why, so that we can get it in your words. Why can't you have a fence 25 foot from your building? Explain to me why that's a problem, what issues that would cause, if any.
It would have been right in the middle of the parking lot. For
Okay.
one, it would have given people 25 feet, and then I have rocks and bedding in the front as well. Obviously, that could be removed, but for the U-Haul trucks and everything, would have had 25 feet to try to turn around and move around. And frankly, I'm not willing to give up more of my property. Bottom
I
line.
prefer not going in that direction.
I understand, but I have my own
Explaining to
boundaries,
us, explaining to us in a real concrete way, where's the harm if we, you were here part of the discussion with her, where's the harm if we force that fence to be 25 feet from your building? What problems does that cause?
Oh, just as simply the word unpractical.
What's so normal if I were to ask somebody moving, besides, well, how long is a U-Haul truck?
They can go 24 foot typically. I have
drove
10
it.
by 31 units.
So a 27
We're, I mean, I'm,
truck trying to make that turn, you may run into eaves and things like
at
that.
this point, I'm working on my patience and tolerance. So
We appreciate that. But what I'm trying to get to, all right, I realize why you're focused on the land. I should be able to do what I want.
not necessarily,
What we have to look
but
at
within reason.
is if we said, no, you have to comply with what it said, what becomes the problem to you? And I think it certainly starts to highlight a little bit of what I would like you to kind
Well,
of,
one, we can start with control.
is just so you have, is it a space issue?
I think I've explained it. I'd have 25 feet for people to drive in and out. They couldn't even drive both ways. Not to mention the amount of my property I'd be giving up. It's not even a qualifiable statement that we're sitting here talking about wasting our time right now. I'm sorry. No disrespect to you.
Truck and trailer goes, average pickup truck is 18 feet?
I would say so.
Well, no,
My
it's gonna be
building
more than that.
starts 100 feet from the center line of the road.
Correct. So I'm trying to think if somebody's got, let's say a 20-foot truck and then they put a 20-foot trailer behind that, for them to make a turn coming perpendicular to that fence. to try
Maybe
to-
not impossible, but very difficult and unacceptable. I mean, if we're trying to make excuses because of law and a reason to approve things, I'm not about games. I mean, come on, guys.
No, just trying to,
I understand. I appreciate every
We have
one
a
of you.
standard that we have to
I'm
meet.
trying to stay in
Grant a variance.
trying to stay in the place of that this isn't ridiculous. That it's not ridiculous, that we're talking about this, like this.
the rules are rules. We're trying to help you through.
I
that.
understand the rules, and let's get back to control, right? I mean, in fact, 25 feet, it's 43 feet. Is there anybody that is not satisfied with that? Before we sit here and act like I'm asking permission over and over, and I'm not gonna sit here and be extra nice like the last guy, and because I'm trying to get something. I'm being reasonable. What I'm asking for is not unreasonable. What you guys are trying to talk about right now and explain this 25 feet, if it's part of your doing your job, great, I respect that. If we've got to put that on video or whatever, great. What else can I answer for you guys?
If someone were to be, say, at one of the buildings, is one of the thinking for, and what we're trying to do is help put, I guess, the words out there so that maybe this makes sense. But if on your buildings, if somebody were in between the two buildings and someone was at one of those buildings near the end to swing out another vehicle,
I'm more worried, for Brian's sake, of a driver coming this direction and only
Trying
having
to cut that,
25 feet
okay.
to make that turn right there or right here. 25 feet pulling, 40 feet worth of truck and trailer.
It's
It's
too
a
bad.
hard swing.
Yeah.
You're gonna
But you'd
really
be back-
struggle coming
And
out.
obviously, if another vehicle was coming that way, there wouldn't be room to do it. I don't think. If you got somebody, you're pulling this way and somebody's coming in this
Yeah,
way.
you're screwed.
That's not.
You're either hitting a building or you're hitting a fence at 25 feet.
I have a question. At what point did the staff come to your property to talk about this request?
I didn't. I received a phone call from a board member after I missed the meeting telling me that I needed to come to the next one.
That's probably Stephen.
It was a gal.
Listen.
Is that-
Remember, you told me I wasn't supposed to call.
Which is true.
Well, I appreciate
That's
that
true.
because I understood that it was important for me to show up, aside from the fact that the fence was already installed. I paid the $600 and I was more than giving with my property.
Exactly.
I figured, whatever.
But part of the reason we wanted you to show up is.
Besides asking for permission?
Well, but for us to find in your favor, we need to have you tell us some other reasons for that. And if you're not here, then you can't do that. So we want to adjourn to hear from you.
And I understand and I apologize,
Why
but
you
I
would do it.
felt that was self-explanatory. It's a fence, it's a store lot.
you have to realize our
No.
mission isn't, and not to cut you off, but our mission isn't to assume. Our mission is to have you explain. And that's what we set, because when we make the motion, it's going to state, here's what you can do. It can't be, well, I'm thinking about this, or I've done this, we have to be able to say, here is where you are. And in this case, we have a fence. Now we have to look at why did we have the fence there? And these questions will help to make the board be able to make a decision. Without it, we're just going on, we're lay people. I don't work in this industry, but I've driven those trucks. I've driven the U-Hauls. And when I was picturing that, like trying to, my wife says, Dave, don't go there. I know what my capabilities are, and I would be one of those that would be going, well, I'll just wait till that vehicle pulls out. Now we have a backup situation. We have a busy road here.
Yeah.
There's a possibility of other things happening. So we're trying to find reasons to say yes. So what we have to have is just, and if you do it calmly with us,
I'll do that.
I know it's just part of our process, because really this is here to protect as well as serve. And we want to be able to do both.
In most cases, yeah.
I mean,
It's pretty simple.
yeah, and it is, and we just have to be able to put that into.
If you look at the surroundings and the other fences and the other areas, I mean, and we're, yeah.
All right, I just have two questions, and I don't see this, once again, I'm the one who struggles with dimensional stuff here. So it may be in here and I'm not reading it correctly. Can you estimate how much space from the edge of your building to the edge of your driving area, how big do you think that is?
Well, it's 100 foot from the center line to the front of the building, 43 feet to the fence. So we got what, 57 feet left there from the building to the fence.
But we also have the grass, right?
Yeah.
And that's, I'm just trying to figure out, if you had to guesstimate how much grass you have versus how much gravel drive there.
That's probably 35 feet, 40 feet maybe. Which is paved asphalt.
And then how much green do you think you have there?
For the fence, there's
from
about
the
12
pit.
feet.
Yeah, from the asphalt to the,
On the outside of the fence?
no, I'm sorry, inside. So from the asphalt paved area to the fence.
It's about 12 to 15 feet. I'm just envisioning the plow
Sure.
over there.
Okay.
But I do know that 75 foot from the center line would have put me right in the middle of that driveway. And it's not hard for a person, it's hard for a person to give up his property to outside of a fence or to what you might call the township, you know, because it's not enclosed really as usable. I mean, not that we really used it anywhere. We're gonna play Frisbee right by the road, but still, you
I
know.
think it goes to Nick's point of, if it were the hardship that we have to prove, is if you did move that to where that was, if you were at that point and you're in the middle of that, then there's not enough space for a vehicle to safely negotiate that turn.
I
And
understand what we have to
that's
do.
what we have, that right there is a potential reason for why we would look for the variance.
You have a code of 75 foot written. We have to sit here.
Yeah, and we just have to
Yeah.
just dissect a little bit why we wouldn't do that here, because your building is there and.
Seems elementary, but I'm here for you.
Come on, man.
Would the
President.
hardship also be the cost that you would have to incur to move the fence?
Oh,
Would that be a hardship?
It cost me $7,700 to install that fence. I'm not happy with the installation. So, I mean, but yeah, it would be very expensive.
yeah.
And again, I want to remind the board that I pay almost $13,000 a year in property taxes, which is, before I paid it off, was a third of my profit for 11 years, if not more. And I can't even sell a car out there for sale on my own property to make a couple extra bucks.
So it would be a hardship.
Yes.
Absolutely, sir. Marvin, I thank you for presenting it like that, because that's.
That's what we're trying to do. The
that's a-
questions, we're gonna piece them together here to see if we can come up with, how that would be the case. We want to move potentially to those, or do we have some?
Do we have any other questions for the applicant?
I know.
All right.
I see it.
Okay, thanks. Do you want to have a seat? Well, certainly we can ask you if you have any other questions while you're sitting there. But I will note, we don't have anybody in the public, so I'm not going to open it up for public comment. And then we can just move on
Is
to.
my presence still required, or?
Only if I know the outcome.
I would, so in case we do have the question, that we would be able to get an answer on something that might
I didn't try to.
You don't want it to go, wait till another meeting, so.
I just, you know, I work on
Time and
myself every day
Time
and
and
these kind of
money.
things that really are political and stuff, they just bother me sometimes. I've been self-employed my whole life, so I've been dealing with this way too much, including an audit with the IRS in 2011. So obviously, being that there's not even a tax code for income tax, and I know that, and we pay it, and that we pay it voluntarily, or they'll seize our stuff, you know, we gotta swallow that pill too.
Yeah,
All right, we're gonna focus in here on the fence,
got it.
not the IRS.
No, please don't get me started.
We got a shot to get out of here, without turning to the IRS. All right. You know, procedurally, I want to start there first. Arguably, neither one of you can vote, which if Stephen were here, I'd probably have a couple questions regarding that, because we really didn't consider it all the first time. We just adjourned it because he wasn't here. But I think we're stuck in that space right now. But as far as the three of us, any questions? Do we want to go through the pieces? Do we feel like we've accomplished enough of that? So,
One statement I wanna just add, if I
is it
may.
about the IRS?
No, can't get started. I would have liked the whole process to have gone down different when I sent in the application, $600, and I followed up where I didn't hear anything. He said he sent me an email, but then I had gotten a letter, but then the timeline had passed, and then you guys' meeting was like 2.5 months out, and I had to get my fence in before winter. So it's not how I would have wanted to go down. If that seems disrespectful, I apologize, but timelines were there. And I would have liked to have been contacted by mail, just like I was for this meeting. Emails, you get spam, you get everything else, or a phone call. I mean, I paid $600. I took the time to fill out the paperwork and turn it in. And all I got was an email response that I didn't see. So I'm gonna take accountability for that too, because I don't scroll through my email every day. But as far as my input, as far as contact, that really messed my timeline up. And I did come here to get a permit that day, and instead I got told I was gonna have a meeting 2.5 months down the line, which was the dead of winter. So I do apologize for not following the protocol as it would have liked to have been. With that said.
I just,
Thank you.
like, say I'll follow up with Steve on that. There was
Yeah,
somebody else who didn't get to a meeting that they didn't realize, so we'll tighten that up with a phone call
The
or
meeting
something.
was fine. It was the response to my variance of any action being taken that I didn't know. I just figured it
Okay.
wasn't responded to, or everything was just fine, paid the permit, it took the $600, you're good to go.
Well,
That day I found out that was the case. You got a meeting 2.5 months away.
All right, we're gonna, I think, just cover dimensional variance standards here, as we discussed before, so. Okay, practical difficulties. So if we enforce this ordinance as is, what practical difficulties would the applicant have?
I think the gentleman said it, it's costing money,
Cost him money, he shouldn't have
money and time.
money and time, yeah.
It's just that simple.
And, I mean, it makes it pretty hard to, with the vehicles moving in and out, but to have to move that fence doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, this is a bit ridiculous to say, I'll say it anyway. We could enforce the fence being where it is, but then we have to move the buildings back. Right? I mean, that's what,
That would be more costly.
at a practical level, I mean, if you force this, you'd have to move the buildings back.
Right,
And so then we are in a bit of a balance of what's more economically and less difficult. I mean, it's not realistic to move the buildings back, but that is the other option. So clearly that's a issue with this piece of property if we had to enforce it.
It would not be practical.
So, okay, special conditions or circumstances exist which are peculiar to this land, structures, or buildings involved, which are not the same for others in the same zoning district. Well, now we're dealing with Whitehall Road, essentially
Right.
commercial
right.
wise. And I will go back to the buildings. I mean, we have buildings that are built, those aren't gonna be moved. frankly, if those buildings were 50 feet back, we might be having a different discussion. I don't know that, but
Yeah, well, yeah, because then he would have more.
then there's
front
more
space
room,
turning around.
et cetera. But what's unique to this property is the fact that those buildings are there. And is every bit as important as a couple pine trees. So,
I also want to make the point too, is that because we're discussing and trying to decide about the fence, there is a fence on the adjacent property
Yep.
at the same distance from the road that's been in existence. Just keep that in mind.
Many years.
so Marvin, I think you drifted right into C, right? Which is, by enforcing this, are we depriving the applicant of rights that other people or other adjacent properties are?
That's correct.
I mean, this is not the same as the first one we discussed, but it's not that dissimilar either, that we do have some things on both sides
That's correct.
going there. Anything else regarding that? Okay, will it be, if we do authorize this, any substantial detriment to any other lands or other properties around the area?
I can't see that.
I didn't see any at this point.
And I certainly think the applicant made a good point. And I actually did this at lunch today when I drove in and I just kind of parked there and looked around. As you look around, properties to the left, property in front, frankly, the black fence looked nicer than anything else I was seeing.
Not like this fence looks nicer than the other fence.
Sitting,
Yeah,
that black
Other
stone
side.
fence looked better than anything else I could see in that area. So, so I don't think there's a detriment there. And I think, Marvin, you may have said it, but I want to make sure we just get that as part of our decision making. Part of the issue here is the fence could be moved closer to the buildings. But the minute we do that, we're almost in a safety issue. I mean, no different than we've discussed with Dollar General and a turnaround for a semi and the loading dock, as we did that one time. I mean, that, I think that you drew that out and it's.
Yeah.
I've done enough trailers and storing locks. I want all the space I've got. And I even would argue that 12, and it's one of the reasons I asked that question, that 12 to 15 foot grass buffer, that's a buffer. That gives you a little extra space, because even if we had the fence moved right up to the line, to me, we lose a buffer there that I think also helps with safety. I mean,
Well, when I used a 27-foot Ryder truck and I had a Honda Accord on the back with the tow dolly, I didn't back up. I didn't try to turn that thing around, but I knew I had to go where I could get in and out easily. I couldn't even imagine trying to maneuver.
Yep.
Smacking a fence, sorry.
and depending on the situation with that buffer there, the vehicle could pull over if they had to, if it was just a passenger vehicle or something small or something to that effect, without having to back up or that sort of thing. So I think that helps. That helps as well. So, okay. Any other questions or thoughts from?
Not at all.
Right. Then I think we reached that point. We have a motion to propose or to put on the floor.
Does this have a number to it?
It does. It's 2206.
24 feet?
That's what dates back, and I believe it's probably suggested language.
That's what I'm looking for, the suggested number.
Oh, he doesn't have it. No, it's not in here. So,
Yeah, that's the highest staff before it was on. I don't know, yeah, but I gotta have the number. Yeah. Yeah.
I think if you're in favor of it,
Well, I make the motion that we
this first
pass
paragraph would probably
the first paragraph.
cover. Well, let me pause.
Yep.
Before we do that.
Yep.
Because as I'm reading here, we never considered the height of the fence, correct?
From 4 feet to
The 6 feet.
6 feet. Is the existing fence 6 feet?
To me, that doesn't change my analysis at all. I'm way more concerned about the location than the height. And since, as Mr. Holman said earlier, the goal here is to eventually have a security fence.
Mm-hmm.
I think even me with my bad knee has a shot at a 4-foot fence to hop over, but not a 6-foot. So
You can go try it if you want.
I'm not ready to have my other knee done yet, but when I am. So for me, I think we've got to address that in the motion. Probably, but unless the other two members feel
Trying to find a
differently,
case number.
or you want to discuss that more.
ZBA 22-06.
Yep.
Mhm.
At this particular point, it's irrelevant because the fence is already there. Whatever decision we make, it's on the request. Do we say that the height will make a determining factor with a decision?
We just have to approve the 6-foot.
So your verbiage just has to be in the verbiage of that.
The resolution should have it in there.
The storage group that right up the road and guard dogs are all 6 foot also.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a security
standard.
fence, not a.
So it's basically make a motion to approve the variance of the ZBA 22-06 for the 6-foot fence to remain, including
Right to me.
yes.
Well, to be approved, so it would be, yeah. So we would also allow the dimensional variance of 35 feet from section 4.37.8.1B and 11.5E1. And that's, we approve both the location of the fence where it's placed
Yes,
and the height of 6 foot,
yes.
I think is what you said, right?
That's that motion. Yes, that's it. That's what I'm saying.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll support the motion.
Right. Well, I don't have any comments regarding that, so I will vote yes.
I'd like to make a comment that voting in support of this variance is really predicated on an existing request or existing
An existing fence.
request.
It was done prior
It was
to.
done prior, and I think the records need to reflect that.
Okay.
So
Do you want to make the motion?
But just to know, I would vote no. The only reason we're doing this is because it's already there.
understand that. The staff isn't here to answer some pertinent questions. That was important because the property owner had to come back a second time.
Once.
It's once, but again, staff is not here to answer the real question. What really happened from the staff point of view that it got to us at this particular point? This should not have come to us after the fact. It should have been worked out at the staff level prior to. And I want that to be reflected in the records. That's important, even if we do approve it.
And if I may speak, I have some accountability too, to have followed up sooner than to just assume that everything was A-okay because I hadn't heard anything. So what I would, if I may add to that, what I would have liked is a letter like I got for the meeting, because that's more effective. Emails have junk, so I had taken the time, filled out the variance, dropped it all off, paid the money, and then felt like I just didn't hear anything and I had to follow up myself. That's kind of why that timeline went like that too. So there is accountability here too, not just
We appreciate that.
there.
I'm done.
And
Continue.
I'm certainly in favor on a procedural basis.
That's fine.
I go back to, you don't get to do what you want to build it. And then because you build it, get approval. I still feel you have to have the reasons for it. But I agree that staff could have probably, there's some cleanup work that needs to happen in that process, so. Okay, I forget where we're at now. I believe we're ready to vote.
We did vote. All we need is roll call. But I gotta redo?
Nope, I voted yes. I'm now looking at you to see how you're gonna vote.
Oh, I say yes.
All right. Ms. Nash?
Yes, Marvin said yes.
All right. there we are.
The motion.
Well, that's why I was assuming you weren't opposed either. All right, so that motion passes. Thank you for coming in and taking the time to explain everything to us. So,
Thank you for thanking me. Are you guys, did I hear you say you're all volunteers?
yes,
It is.
Thank you for your time.
Small.
Appreciate your service to Dalton Township.
we might make minimum wage occasionally. But give us some.
Never
A little mileage maybe.
Yeah, so, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate you.
Okay, next we have new business, which would be the election of officers for 2023.
So you need to select,
Chair, vice chair, and secretary, correct? Because we still need our secretary to sign our minutes. What you've been doing, correct?
Yeah.
So,
let's do this way.
You're in trouble.
Would you like to be a part of the process, to be one of the people that would do, or is anyone that would like to not be?
I think you should start with that one. Does anybody want to step down? I'm willing to help.
I'll step down.
We're not looking for volunteers.
No, we don't look
If
for
you're
a volunteer.
interested in maintaining it, I guess.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying I'd be happy to step down, but stay on the.
Yeah, 'cause I remember the last time that we went through this.
I remember
you
I
were-
got stuck with
You
that.
were trying to get me, and I'm just like, and I found out like, I'm not just, can't do that to
And
me.
basically all it is if we did the way that I would suggest, which would be I would not mind being secretary. If you maintain your position, you would be the vice, and then in case of a
Yes.
meeting, you would be here.
Done.
If he has to.
if anybody else wants this wonderful spot.
Not on your life, not on your life. You do this very well.
That's what you did.
I just sit here and agree with him. That's why
On the planning commission, you run that.
we got, Mama wants to new pair of shoes, how's that work, you know?
Is there a motion for that?
I think we have to,
I think that's your motion.
see, my
I
motion.
make a motion to nominate Dave to be the secretary of the CBA for the remainder of his.
Adult life.
Yeah.
That's tenure.
Support.
Yep, could you do it individually
I
or?
think we could do all three.
Like,
I'm worried about who needs shoes at your house right now, so I don't want to delay this too
well, you know,
long.
just forget them.
So you're doing
We
it
did all right, we
individually,
did.
or do you want to do it collectively?
I think collectively, just make it one easy swoop, unless there are any opposing views on. Okay.
So you
Somebody
rescind the
did.
last motion and start a new motion.
Mhm.
Rescind my motion.
We didn't have a second yet, so
Rescind.
Yeah,
Rescind.
Nola just did a second.
Oh.
efficient.
She is with the board meetings too.
So, and I'm supposed to take notes on this, I'm like, oh, we can do what? I'll be seeing
So
you
let's do
after.
the one and then,
All right, all those in favor of the first motion nominating Dave as secretary? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. Any other motions or combination of motions?
I'll make a motion to nominate Nick as the vice chair and Craig as the chair.
support.
All right, we have a motion on the floor that has been supported. Any comments, questions regarding that motion? Otherwise, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? All right, the motion carries. Okay, the board will note we do not have anybody in the public right now for public comments, so we will not open public comment at this point. And if there's nothing further,
I will make a motion to adjourn.
we are so adjourned. All right, at 7:25. Okay.
Now, I was not here at the last, I was not here at the last meeting.
No, Jeff,
Yes.
I was not at the last meeting. Do I still sign, would I still sign the meeting?
I was
notes from
trying, I heard
last
people
time?
leave.